All right! Welcome to Rockstar! Now, just so you all know, we're going to cover this topic as fast and as completely as we can. Just the way you like it. Thanks for watching!
Chapter 1. Imagine that you're a student at one of the gloomiest, harshest, and most unfair high schools that has ever been built. This is a special high school, run by an oppressive group of teachers and administrators. There's no time to laugh with your friends in the halls. There's no lunch break and no extracurricular activities like sports teams or dances. Instead, there's just constant, mind-numbing work, all day long. When you're not in class slaving away on repetitive, boring worksheets, you report straight to detention. But you don't think much about how terrible this school is. You're used to it. You just keep your head down and try to make it through each day. But then, one afternoon, it all changes. A mysterious accident gets rid of all the teachers, and the students are left in charge of the school. The only catch is that the school still has to operate as normal. The students have to keep learning, and they have to pass standardized tests at the end of the year. How would you change things? What policies would you make to make the school fun again? To make learning fun? How would you run a productive school without heaping misery upon your fellow students? Well, the first set of rules the whole student body agrees on. 1. No more detention. 2. Everyone can text and snack during class. And most importantly, 3. No student can behave like a teacher because all students are equal. You all agree to create a system where the honor students teach the rest, and little by little, they begin managing the daily operations of the school. You know, the practical stuff, because someone has to do it. Eventually, the honor students take more and more responsibility and delegate more and more chores to the other students. There's no janitor left to mop the floor or take the trash out. Someone has to do it. There's no cook in the cafeteria to make meals for the students. Someone has to do it. Someone has to stay late and have conferences about curriculum. Someone has to grade all those essays. But despite having to do a lot of the work, the students agree that it's much better to be managed by peers than those mean old teachers. As time passes, students even forget what it was like to have teachers in charge. But after a few years of running the school, the honor students become just like the teachers. Their behavior becomes indistinguishable from how the teachers behaved. Now tell me, as a student, are you any better off being ruled by the honor students than you were being ruled by the teachers? Have things improved? Can you say that they even really changed? Are the rules being followed? Are all students still equal? In George Orwell's classic novel Animal Farm, our main characters face a very similar situation. Animal Farm takes place on Manor Farm in the rural countryside of England and follows the story of farm animals who are able to talk and plan amongst themselves as people do. A dream of a better life for the animals leads to a revolution, and the animals overthrow the human farm owners, burning all the symbols of their former oppression like whips and bridles to celebrate their newfound freedom from punishment and abuse. The pigs are put in charge to keep the farm running, and for a short time, the animals live the dream of the revolution. The produce from the farm is shared with everyone, and everyone is given a good life, cared for by the system the pigs maintain. They develop specific rules to live by called commandments that they write on the sign of the barn, like 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But slowly, the lives of the animals become even worse than they were under humans. The pigs use propaganda to convince the lower animals that their lives are actually better now, to make the animals afraid that the humans could return at any moment. The commandments on the barn wall begin to change. One now reads, 4 legs good, 2 legs better. At this point, the pigs begin to walk on their hind legs and carry whips, just like the human farmers used to. At the climax of the novel, the pigs invite a neighboring human farmer, Mr. Pilkington, to the farm to inspect their operation. During this visit, the animals are not sure who to be more afraid of, the men or the pigs. The pigs host a party in the farmhouse and the animals watch through the windows. Mr. Pilkington commends the pigs on running the farm with such discipline, getting so much work out of the animals and giving them such little food. He says that whether the farm is run by animals or humans, the problem is always in getting enough work out of your laborers. The animals have their lower animals to deal with, just like how the humans have their lower classes. As the pigs and men all toast and continue to play their card game, the animals walk away dejected. They hear a loud crash and rush back to see a fight in progress. Apparently, Mr. Pilkington and the leader pig played the same card at the same time. Both sides accused each other of being cheats. As the animals look through the window, it becomes impossible for them to figure out who is a pig and who is a man. At its core, Animal Farm is really about communism, a kind of government where everything is owned by the government and then distributed equally among everyone. There's no private property, everything is divided among the community. This means that no one ends up very rich, but no one ends up very poor either. Not a bad trade-off, as long as that's really how things end up. Overall, Orwell argues that while the idea of communism might seem nice, especially to students in a harsh high school run by authoritarian teachers, or to poor farm animals who are being exploited and worked to the bone, it never works out in reality how it's supposed to in theory. A communist government is run by people, and it's an unfortunate fact of life that people can sometimes get greedy, especially if there's no consequences for their greed, because they're in a position of unchallenged power, just like the pigs in Animal Farm. Communist governments run a real chance at becoming corrupt and taking the best things for themselves, leaving the general population in poverty. Communism is based on the philosophies of a German-born philosopher named Karl Marx. Marx was born into an upper-class family, and he had the opportunity to observe the unfairness of class difference. He thought that eventually economic inequality and class difference would lead oppressed people to overthrow their government and replace it with a system called socialism, which has some similarities to communism, but also many differences. First of all, unlike communism, socialism isn't a kind of government. It's a strategy that works its way into just about every government to one degree or another. Examples of socialism include government-owned universities, post offices, nature reserves, freeways, etc., because these things are publicly owned. While everything in both communist and socialist societies is publicly owned, like companies, factories, and businesses, the biggest difference is that communism emphasizes sharing with the community no matter who did what to achieve total social equality. Socialism, however, emphasizes government ownership not to distribute everything equally, but to distribute things according to how much work someone put in. Both systems are intended to protect workers from exploitations by people like factory owners and landlords. After all, if factory workers are doing all the hard work, but the owner gets almost all the profit, and the workers barely get enough money to eat, that's not very fair, is it? But, as the book will show, communism carries with it its own danger of exploitation. All things considered, Animal Farm is really a statement against totalitarianism, where any form of government has complete control over all aspects of society, religion, production of food and goods, leisure, culture, economics, or anything else you can think of. Although both the Soviet Union and the farm had hopeful beginnings, both situations quickly disintegrated into oppressive totalitarianism communism. In the book, our story starts with an old show pig, Old Major, sharing his dream he had, where animals were independent, no longer slaves to the humans. Old Major is meant to depict Karl Marx, because Old Major's dream is basically identical to Marx's philosophies, which are often referred to as Marxism. Shortly after Old Major shares his dream with the other animals, he dies, but his dream lives on, warped by two clever pigs. The pigs, Napoleon and Snowball, work Old Major's vision into a philosophy of their own, which they call animalism. At first, animalism seems like a great way to lift the animals out of their terrible conditions. But as the novel progresses, animalism turns into a tool the pigs use to control the lower animals. The pigs represent the upper class, or in Marx's words, the bourgeois, while the lower animals, such as horses, sheep, goats, cows, chickens, dogs, and donkeys, represent the working class, what Marx calls the proletariat. But the pigs represent even more than the bourgeois, just as the farm represents more than a farm. After all, why would Orwell write such a simple fable about a bunch of animals? Well, he's telling more than just the story of what happened between pigs and the other animals in an imagined scenario. He's also actually using symbolism to describe historical events from the Soviet Union. You see, for a long time, Russia was ruled by czars, which are similar to kings. But starting with the revolution of 1917, socialists took over and were quickly replaced by communists. Some characters in Animal Farm represent specific historical figures from this transition. Certain events in the book reference actual battles or uprisings, and other animals on the farm represent specific classes or parts of the government. We'll go over a few of the most important connections right now. Snowball and Napoleon, our two clever pigs, represent two leaders of the Bolshevik Revolution. Snowball is Leon Trotsky, a military leader in the Revolution of 1917. He later served as the Soviet equivalent of the Secretary of State, and then as head of the military. Vladimir Lenin was the leader of the revolution, and the first head of the Soviet Union. After his death, Joseph Stalin quickly rose to power. The character Napoleon is meant to be Stalin. Trotsky opposed Stalin's rise and brutal dictatorship. As a result, Trotsky was exiled from the Soviet Union and took up residence in Mexico. In Animal Farm, Napoleon and Snowball are always at odds on how to best run the farm after the revolution has ended. At a meeting to decide whether or not to build a windmill for the farm, which would improve the lives of the animals, Napoleon unleashes attack dogs on Snowball, and the animals never see Snowball again. From that time on, Napoleon is the uncontested leader of Animal Farm, just as Stalin became the ruler of the Soviets. Other symbolic characters in the book include Boxer, a cart horse. Boxer is a massive horse, as strong as 2 or 3 horses put together. His personal motto is, "I will work harder." If things don't go well, Boxer believes it must be a fault within himself or the lower animals as a whole, a problem that can always be solved by working harder. Later in the novel, he adopts another motto, "Comrade Napoleon is always right." Boxer's character illustrates the uneducated lower class. Boxer is patriotic, but ignorant. He can never learn to read past the letter D. As a result, he's a prime candidate to soak up the pig's propaganda. The other cart horse, Clover, is an impressive and gentle female horse, a motherly character who looks out for the interest of the other animals. Clover represents the middle class. She has more education than Boxer and can read the alphabet, but still cannot form letters into words. Clover will continually question the propaganda and actions of the pigs, but she doesn't possess the writing or speaking skills to dispute what they say and do. There are also the dogs, who were rarely given names. They're kept impersonal because they're meant to represent the military and the police force of the Soviet Union. The dogs oppress the other animals with their ferocity, and they aren't interested in furthering their minds, even though they're able to read. Although there are a few well-educated animals on the farm, like Muriel the goat or Benjamin, the pessimistic old donkey, all the other animals can't read any better than Boxer. Like the dogs, these lowest animals simply do as they're told with no thoughts of their own. Animal Farm is a classic dystopian novel, just like Orwell's other famous book, 1984. A dystopia is an imperfect world where everything is basically terrible. Society has gone awry and everything and everyone is miserable. It's the opposite of a utopia or perfect society where everything is great. Through this simple farmyard fable, Orwell tells a vivid and detailed story about the rise of communism in the Soviet Union and illustrates the loss of the dream of a utopian society. When the animals stage revolution, they have their own utopia for a brief time, but their society quickly begins to crumble. As the situation deteriorates, the animals believe they're living in a free society where they're working for themselves rather than the thieving humans. But the bitter irony of Animal Farm is that in pursuit of their utopian dream, the animals have ended up worse off than ever before, even as they continue to believe that they are free. No matter how beautiful the philosophy of the farm started out, their ideals aren't enough to halt the inevitable creeping of corruption or the danger of a totalitarian regime.
Well, all right. We hope you enjoyed that. You just did it, the first chapter of the topic. Now, just so you know, there are 4 more chapters to go in this app, and it will only take you about 45 more minutes to complete, and you are totally done. Now check this out. The app also comes with about 15 pages of analysis and summary that you can download and use any way you need to. Here's what you gotta do. You gotta click the link below and go directly to the Apple App Store and download the full app. It's fast and easy to do. Thanks for watching, everybody.